promise you, once it starts, it will never stop.
It'll never stop. It'll be a death by a thousand cuts.
No, it will take a revolution to stop it. I mean a revolution with guns.
I'm going to say that, a bloody revolution. Like I said to you, from all of this start from this platform, this is at the ideological stage. You know, we have, as the speaker down at Carrick McCross said, we have this opportunity to avert the civil crisis our children and easily our grandchildren will face in the future of bloody conflict. This is the ideological stage, and this means engagement on your level. But I wanted to talk about, just before we leave the journalist as well, and we move on to the Sinn Féin and the Chinese, as we said. This was from a commenter on the channel, and I picked it up and saved it. And I never thought I'd get the chance to use it, and I'm going to list a few names in this, and it's from a comment. But the comment said it was easily in the 90s that the great purge from feminist and multicultural was foisted upon us, with voices like John Waters, who correctly pointed out at the IFP address in the RDS that the press are indeed the enemy of the nation of Ireland. Her anti-Irish propaganda. Voices like Kevin Moyers and the Reveller were also forced out, also brought questioning dogma, but wheeled out. Now, Una Mullally, Saoirse Pollak, Kitty Holland, Katie Sheridan, Miriam Lord, Roisin Ingle, Patsy McGarry, Frank MacDonald, Fintan O'Toole, Conor Gallagher, Donald Clark, all are anti-Irish journalists churning out propaganda of the Irish anti-Irish Times. And the comment was led with the, you'll remember, Patriots way back in the day also said of the journalists and the papers back in the day before the revolution that such unpatriotic comment at the height of the fight for freedom would not be tolerated. Words from the past echoing in the future. But I thought it was important to let that commentator out.
Yeah, well,
that the eyes are upon these people, not just these people, but the journalists that are.
Well, to be honest with you, Rowan, I don't think it'd be so much easier to make a list of the journalists who are not like that, and that list would have precisely that number of names on it.
Mm.
There are none.
There are none.
There are none. Now, this is very interesting because I remember a time. I mean, I didn't know at the time that I was an unusual journalist. I didn't know it. I just thought, because I came from the left and I was starting to kind of educate myself through various things. I had several red pill moments. The first was that when I realised I was an alcoholic, and I started to investigate religion because that's what AA put in front of me, the whole idea of God as I understand him. And I started to investigate that out of necessity, out of dire necessity. And I began to see the whole structure of this in a different way, that it was actually to do with me and my structure and the necessity I had to create some kind of understanding from my desire as a human person that was not transient, that was not dangerous, that was not chemical, that was not addictive, all of these things. And that's kind of where I go. So I started to explore that, and I started to write out of that experience. That would have been, I stopped drinking in 1990, so that was kind of the moment when several things happened. The same year I had an experience where I went to Czechoslovakia for the first free elections after the communist era, and I wrote about that for the Irish Times, even though many people in the Irish Times are already trying to stop me going and writing about it because they didn't want that my kind of spin coming back on there. But I had an experience there which I've told before, but it's worth telling again. You know that I met a guy called Ivan Shrek, a Czech guy, and he lived just off the Narodny Street, which is the street that the revolution started on. And the revolution in Prague in November '89 was a very strange event because it was orchestrated by the KGB, believe it or not, because they wanted to put their puppet in to remove the hardline Czech Communist Party from government, because they were so hardline that Gorbachev was convinced that they would bring all of communism down across the entire Eastern Bloc.
Yeah.
So they had a puppet ready. And the thing was that the police would then, there was a students' march, and the police had instructions to charge the students' march on Narodny Street with their baton charge. There was one student, a KGB agent, was infiltrating the students, a guy called Michael Smith, that was his name, and his instructions were to lie down on the ground, pretend to be dead. The plan was, once the word got out that a student had been killed, the people of Prague would come onto the streets, 1 million people at least. They would bring down the communists, and then the puppet would step out onto the platform, onto the balcony, and everything would be grand. It didn't work because the puppet pulled out at the last minute, and Václav Havel stepped onto the balcony instead, and that was a different outcome than they expected. But my friend Ivan Shrek, on the point where the student was felled, an altar had sprouted up, with candles, and everybody passing by would bring a candle and light it, and so the candle wax started to flow onto the road, and my friend got the job of cleaning up the candle wax and bringing it back to his apartment, where it was all in these boxes on the floor. And I used to go around there, and we would have these debates about politics and socialism and capitalism. And I was this kind of soft lefty at the time. Not really ideological, I'd read all this stuff, but I kind of had this idea that socialism was fundamentally ethical and well-intentioned program. And he just laughed at me, and he just shook his head, and this argument went on for weeks while I was there. And then, on the day I was leaving, he came with me to the airport in the taxi, and he had a box on his lap. And I said, "What's in the box, Ivan?" He said, "You'll see." So we got to the airport. He accompanied me to the departure gates, and then he gave me the box. He opened it up, and it had half a dozen of these heads, which he had actually made from the candle wax. He'd got busts of the communist leaders and made molds, and he had made heads, candle-shaped heads of Lenin and Stalin and Gottwald, who was the great tyrant of the Czechoslovakia communist era. And he said, he just gave me the box. He said, "You must take to Ireland the heads of the socialist murderers." Whew!
I woke you up.
Whoa! There's something about that phrase that you can't get away from. That's it. No bullshit.
Yeah.
No more bullshit. And that was the beginning of my... And the third red pill moment for me was when my daughter was born, and I was a single father, and it's a well-known story, but I won't go into it because it's private, but it's also governed by the in-camera rules, because we had to go before family courts in this and other jurisdiction over across the water. But my immediate reaction when I encountered what was clearly an unbelievable, for me it was unbelievable injustice, that at that time, 1996 Ireland, you could be the father of a child and have no rights.
No rights whatsoever.
None. I couldn't believe it.
Still hasn't advanced down much.
No, it hasn't. It hasn't at all. But everybody else has got rights to everybody else's children. Huh?
Except the father.
LGBT rights, lesbians have rights over other people's children, no problem.
Yeah.
But the fathers have no rights. So my attitude was, and I've caricatured it like this, Ron, that I thought, well, I used to work in Dublin, and I was the editor of McGill and in Dublin. I used to work on Hot Press, and all of these lefty people around me, and I thought to myself, well, I know where to go now, because we have always investigated injustice. That's what we did. We don't tolerate injustice, and I will go to my former colleagues, my compadres, and I will tell them what I've discovered, and they will come running. And they will sort it out.
Not quite what happened, is it?
Not quite what happened. They kicked the head off me. And they've been doing it ever since. And that said to me,
I'm not
and as I was on the ground being kicked and my head covered, I thought, this is very interesting.
Yeah.
Isn't it very interesting?
This is a turn up for the books.
Yeah. And they're still doing it. I mean, and all the names that you read out there, in particular, they're the guilty parties.
Yeah.
Because in my book that I wrote out last year, Give Us Back the Bad Roads, virtually all of them feature in one way or another.
We have the engagements on Twitter and stuff. I just want to...
So where was I going with that?
Your third red pill
that was my red pill moments, And I think that, I used to look at journalists like I started to write about things like the Irish Nation. And, I mean, you have to be very careful because the provos were up there killing people by the new time. So it was a very risky thing to do, because just as you now get called a racist if you question government policy on mass migration, if you actually said something positive about any aspect of nationhood, or even when I actually was writing about the famine on the 150th anniversary in 1995, I was accused of being a provo.
Right.
Unbelievable, but true. Same thing. The same thing was going on. The same people were doing it then that are doing this stuff now. Sinn Féin, IRA, it's a long story, but I mean, there are certain broad strokes you can make immediately. First thing that needs to be said about it is that of the 3,000 odd people who were killed in the entirety of the Troubles over 30 years, Sinn Féin killed 49%. 49%. And that included a goodly number of their own people who they killed, they shot as informers. They were ruthless, utterly ruthless. The tout, as they were called, the body, the tradition was, the body was found in the alleyway, bullet in the head, tenor in the palm of the hand, to humiliate the family and everybody. That was the purpose of that. These people had no mercy, no compassion, no humanity whatsoever, which had all long since gone. As a journalist, most journalists took the view, a moralistic view about that, which is understandable. I mean, you know, Kevin Myers, Owen Harris, Eamon Dunphy, they majored in condemning. I didn't see the point in that. I thought it would be counterproductive. We should just drive this on, we continue this. And I tried, as both a journalist, as an editor first, in the different magazines, to kind of get journalists to actually investigate, to talk about the context of all this. We wrote about all this kind of stuff, and related issues like the Birmingham 6 and all of this kind of stuff, and the Gibraltar shootings and all that. And we were fair, always fair, to Republicans. And when I became a columnist, and particularly during the police process, I tried all the time. I remember there was one issue which was really problematic, and that was the issue of disarmament, because there was enormous pressure on the IRA to disarm publicly, and they were refusing to do it. And that was a stalemate that threatened to derail the entire process. And I understood why the IRA couldn't disarm. That would be admission that it was a terrorist campaign, not a war. And it was vital for them that they retained the idea that it was a war. Whether we decide retroactively it was or it wasn't is a different question, and that's a long discussion that we could have sometime. But I was prepared to do that. Simultaneously, through a lot of that, I started to write about family courts, first of all, and to talk about the issues that we mentioned, you know, that before, about the treatment of fathers, the absence of rights for fathers. And I kind of went from there into the whole question of feminism, and also things like male suicide, which was like an epidemic at that time in Ireland. Like 4 out of 5 suicides were men. And men's health, which was totally neglected at the time, you know, by the government, by the Department of Health, and so on. So I was writing about those things as well. And I remember I was probably the only journalist in Ireland who was kind of prepared to give the provost a fair shake in terms of actually expressing their point of view, putting their point of view to the public, and allowing people to see that there was some rationale to it. So I remember after the Good Friday Agreement, very soon after, I can't remember exactly when, but it was very shortly after, was in Ardesh, Sinn Féin Ardesh, in the RDS. And I went along, not wanting any kudos particularly, but thinking, well, I've done a job. I've been fair to these people. From the minute I walked into that hall that day, I was under incessant attack from what I'm going to call harridans, who were not interested in anything I'd written about the struggle or the troubles. Going, you're the fellow be writing that shite in the Irish Times about women. That's all I got, the whole day. And I remember actually thinking, this is very weird. Like, it was all women. Men didn't say anything, until one man did say something. And I'll tell you what he said, and I'll tell you who he was. I was in the loo, and let's say I was washing my hands. I wasn't, but it's a family show.
No, it's not.
And another man came in and started washing his hands beside me. I looked round. Just Jerry Adams. Hey, John. Hi, Jerry. I see you'll be writing there in the Irish Times about men. I do, Jerry, yeah. Aye. That was it.
That was it?
That was it. And out of that I inferred something wrong, which I don't doubt. And I've confirmed it many times since. When the men were in jail in the 70s, the IRA, Sinn Féin, the women took over, the feminist extremists took over the movement.
Like the Willie Mandelas of their time?
Yeah, and they basically built, there was a vacuum there of policy. And I discovered that as well when I was working for the Observer back in...
That would actually explain a lot.
It does explain it all. Because that's why I want to tell this story, because it brings us right up to date. I remember in 1994 I was writing for The Observer in London, and I was writing a column, and I was writing feature articles and reports as well, and I had this idea. One day I was talking to my editor, and I said, I wonder, what are Sinn Féin's policies? What do they actually believe about economics, the environment, whatever?
The third party opposition, they're quite happy to sit in opposition so they don't have to enforce or produce.
Well, it was very interesting because I went up to Parnell's Square, I think it was the office in at the time, and talked to them up there, and they literally didn't know what to answer me. They literally had to go up in the attic and dig up a whole load of pamphlets. Yeah, dusty pamphlets, and they gave me a bunch of pamphlets, and they were all things about, like, they were really ancient, and it was like, oh, Sinn Féin are in favour of Federal Ireland, you know, rule from Athlone, you know, this kind of stuff, like really mad stuff, like from way before. But there's nothing up to date at all. But meanwhile there was, you know, like an unwritten policy document already already in place.
Just not updated.
And nobody had voted on it. Nobody agreed on it. But it was pretty much, it was beyond recall at this stage.
What would that lead you to believe then?
Well, that basically Sinn Féin, in the vacuum of their policylessness, imported off the peg from America a cultural Marxist agenda long before anybody else had got that to that point.
Through the peace process?
Yeah.
When they were bribed with 300 million by the Americans,
yeah,
that they must bring in progressiveness, liberalism,
yeah,
and the transfer of like the UCD or the DCU teacher that was brought over from the DCU Buffalo.
Mm-hmm.
That professor who then brought in a lot of professors with the cultural Marxism agenda.
Yeah.
Now, just as a side note,
they were used to introduce this to Ireland.
They were used to introduce cultural Marxism into Ireland. Now, that professor has since been done for, he's lost his professorship and he's been done for fraud in his follow-up.
There was big money in it.
Big money.
But you see, they were jockeying things because they were also getting money from Catholic Irish America. And that's been my objective now, to alert Catholic Irish America, alert Catholic Irish America to the reality of this, because they still don't know.
Yeah.
There's a lot of Catholics over there giving them money, thinking that they're the IRA or the Sinn Féin of old, and so that was kind of interesting. Now, you know, to bring us all up to date, like, we know this bizarre situation where a party an organisation which killed 1,500 people, say, give or take, there's more actually, but in the name of what? What, freedom? In the name of 32 county unity? Well, forget that. That's gone. That's not happening. Because they actually were the cause they were the reason why we had to, as a people, jettison our own claim to the territory of the entire island, the Articles 2 and 3, which we did, because we had no choice. But they forced us to do that, which kind of is suspicious to begin with, that they're prepared to do that. So you kind of, oh, what is it? So the 32 county Ireland is gone. That aspiration is gone. The integration of the national territory is gone. Independence, whatever that might mean. Independence from Britain, say, whether that's independence of the entire island or independence of the 6 counties. Well, we saw last week when the British government, when Westminster were ready to impose abortion and gay marriage on Northern Ireland, Sinn Féin could have reconvened Stormont, along with the DUP, who were already willing to do it, had an assembly, and scuppered the whole thing. Sinn Féin sat on their hands.
Didn't want to do it.
So the independence is an optional extra. Like, it's like an a la carte menu.
We don't need that anymore. We're not interested in that anymore.
Yeah. So you have to now. Then you just look at them, what they're doing here, where they're going around bullying communities. I see their representatives making speeches about, oh, this is a very open and...
The far right, now the Sinn Féin are against the far right. They're against nationalists or patriots.
Yeah.
They're speaking out about Ireland. Sinn Féin are against patriotism.
And the slogan which I've heard, you know, and then it's I've seen it on somebody threw my Instagram on Twitter, Sinn Féin's new slogan, Brits out, Africans in.
Why not? That's what they're... I mean, the whole situation in Carrick Cross, where the representatives are there, that the locals feel they can't even speak out and have a public gathering to inform other members of the public, because there's a whole situation going up there that's not being spoken about. It's not being protected. I went specifically at Charlie Flanagan, and not in regard to the Chinese thing. And you know what, John? Before we branch off, I think I'm gonna wrap this one up right here.
Okay.
John, because I'm conscious of the time. We've only got one perspective on the camera, and I think it'd be doing an injustice if we didn't say there will be a follow up. Not holding John to any particular time scale, but because there's so much to talk about.
There are many things, but there is one thing. If you give me a couple of minutes, it's a very important thing, because you used the phrase far right there, and you know, I really do feel that needs to be dealt with, because that's a phrase now that's just trotted out. It has no, you know this better than I do, or as well as I do, this has no basis in reality whatsoever in Ireland. None. Mm-hmm. There is no far right in Ireland. There is no alt right in Ireland. There is only, as far as I know, a bunch of people individually working to do the job journalists are refusing to do. And out of, including you, including Gran Torino, that you go out and you offer to the people of Ireland the opportunity to speak to each other about what has been imposed on them, this great crime that has been imposed, whereby they are being bullied under cover of stealth and darkness to accept things that will radically destroy the ecology of their communities. That the communities they have built up for the safety and security of their families and their children and their neighbours will be destroyed at the whim of somebody in the Department of Justice or the Minister for Justice, and that they will use thugs and bullies to come down and scream racist at anybody in that village who seeks to say, well, hang on a minute, can I ask a question here? Who are these people that are coming in? Oh, racist. And you get the usual scum then coming and throwing milkshakes in their faces and whatnot, and you know all about that. And the guards will look the other way. That's what's happening. And you see, I've noticed that this fear that people have of, you know, this word, racist, this spell word, you know, the ordinary decent people like, who have no animosity towards anybody, who will welcome anybody provided they know who they are and they know that their intentions are good towards their community, but not 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 180 of those people in a village of maybe 3, 4, 500 people, where the imbalance will be such that the village will never recover. They have the right to say that. And I think, you know, they're saying things like, well, we object to direct provision because it's inhumane. It's not inhumane. I can understand why you're saying that, but don't say it anymore, please. Community, I say to communities, don't say that. That's what they want you to say. That's a scam. The correct thing to say is something like, this is our community. We have built it through our sweat and blood to protect our children, to live a decent life. What gives you the right to come here and take advantage of what we have built, to steal it from us, so that you can keep a nice cushy job and keep your masters in Brussels and Berlin happy?
I've made the analogy that the asylum industry is plundering the resources of rural Ireland, local communities, because it's putting an unmanageable burden upon them personally.
Well, you see, what they're working off, this is the blackmail that has been applied, is working off the idea, the implicit idea that this is humanitarian. Mm-hmm. Well, we saw the other day how humanitarian it is. When those Chinese people, those unfortunate people, the bodies were found frozen to death in a container. And we learned that they had between them been paying sums like 20 to 30,000 to Irish people smugglers.
Human trafficking.
Human trafficking. And this is humanitarianism. This is what the government is telling us is actually about humanitarianism. Like, now, who are they? Who are the organisers of an Irish? We won't discuss who it is because we mightn't.
Let the facts come out for themselves. I mean, the police in England are still speaking.
We don't.
The Irish position of it, as you're saying.
You don't want to end up clutching a tenner in a back alleyway somewhere, do you?
Yeah. So on that note, John. Oh, go ahead.
No, so resisting this is an honourable thing for any Irish person to do. There is nothing dishonourable about it. It is nothing like racism. It is the antithesis of racism. It's having respect for the decent people of this country who have worked hard, who have given their sweat and their blood, who have built their communities and are being imposed upon by a cowardly, snivelling government. The worst government in my lifetime, if not in the entire period since independence. The most appalling, disreputable, cowardly, sneaky, lying government I have ever seen in my life. There's nothing disreputable about resisting these, but you need to get your reasons clear in your head. You are defending your communities. You have no excuse to offer for that, nor should you. They have no right to do this. They have no right to impose on your goodwill on your community. They have no right to blackmail you and bully you and lie about you. They have no right to call you names. They do not represent you. I was watching some of the clips that were taken by our friends Gemma and the Irish Patriot and a few people at the Irish Ploughing Championships, National Ploughing Championships. And I saw one in particular, the Minister for Justice, Charlie Flanagan. And I was talking about this the other night to Gemma, and the extraordinary thing that when he was asked for one example of hate speech, all he could come up with was that one guy doorstepped him at the Ploughing Championships.
Yeah.
The Irish Patriot, the young fella, Niall, I don't know his second name, lovely young fella.
Yeah.
And all he did
just
was
asking a simple question.
he asked him, can you talk to me about the mass migration, because a lot of people are very worried. And the immediate I watched Charlie Flanagan's face, and this kind of pus appeared on his mouth, you know, and he said no. And then I thought, the thing that came into my head, Ron, was this guy is like the English viceroy of old, you know, the representative of the crown in Ireland. He's here to implement the will of his external masters on the Irish people. He's not here to represent the Irish people at all. That is his sole purpose.
Mm.
And then, you know, Niall, as the minister ran away, he started walking away, ignoring him and walking away. And Niall started, you're running away, Charlie, you're running away, where are you running to, Charlie? You know, that's the height of the hate speech that the minister is using to justify tearing apart the constitutional protection of our right to speak our mind.
A member of the public cannot ask a public representative a question.
Yes.
At a public event.
Yes. And the journalist, of course, is interviewing him, just throws him the odd couple of softballs.
Charlie ran.
Yeah.
Charlie ran.
What did you see, Minister? What did you see, Minister? Oh, Minister! Oh! The horror of a young fella having the right to ask the Minister for Justice a question.
But him to label it as hate speech and try to smear it out, nobody...
It's shocking.
It's shocking.
It's absolutely shocking. And what is, again, the example I will give, you see, that because of the convocation that the media is capable of orchestrating, where everything is, this clamour is built up, I can well see it, that people start to repeat to each other, oh, did you see that thing? Oh, jeez,
terrible,
no, that
you
was
asked him a question. Imagine asking the minister
Charlie,
a question.
You know, the poor man. Jeez, I saw he was running all over the place. Like, you know, it was terrible now the way that he was ran out with those far right, the far right.
I'm thinking it's changing, John. I'm thinking the social media is having an effect because the ministers are responding a little bit rattled because the people are organising themselves. No one's knowing here.
Well, you see, I'm sitting here for the last 7 months, you know, looking out the window, and I'm kind of, you know, sometimes I can only read for short periods and I can only write for very short periods and I can only walk for very short distances, and I'm watching things. I don't watch TV or I don't listen to the radio or I don't read the papers, but I know I can find out stuff and I talk to people, and it's changed radically in the last year. For sure. The giant is awakening. See, that's what all this is about now.
Logos is rising. Yeah,
they want to close it down before it goes too far. That's the point of hate speech. Because they see that Paddy is waking up. Mm. Do you remember that line of Enda Kenny's the night of the election in 2011? Very strange line, he said, you know.
I got another pension. Wasn't that?
No, it wasn't. It was an amazing line for someone like Kenny to come out with. He was there on, you know, been talking to Brian Dobson, you know, and Dobson asked him a question about, you know, how are you going to talk to the Irish people? Or he said, oh, well, you know, we'll tell them the truth. He says, Paddy always likes to know what the story is. It's true.
No,
it's a good line. To know what it's a good line. Well, now Paddy wants to know what the story is from Leo. And he's not going to listen to any more lies.
No.
Because the people are waking up. They've woken up in Ugderard. They've woken up in Carrickmacross. They've woken up in Achill. They're waking up all over the place. They won't succeed anymore in bullying these communities. Yeah. And the more we can reach those people, because you know, what you do and what I would want to do is just to say, you're not wrong. You're good people. You're decent people. I know you. I've known you all my life. I know the people of Achill. I worked in Westport years ago. I went down there drinking. I went down there at weekends. the best people in the world, best people in the world, they're not racist. It isn't even on the agenda. They're decent, good people. And these scum, sent out by the government, and make no mistake about it, these people you see out with the placards, they're sent out by the government, they're being paid by the government, we know that. Riff-raff of the lowest quality.
Traitors to Ireland.
Well, that as well.
That's what I would call them.
That as well, yeah, but they're just such a, they're so disgusting that they have no place in a democratic society whatsoever. But that's the blue shirt thing, you see. That tradition is there in Fine Gael, going way back nearly 100 years, where you bring in fascists, thugs, to do your dirty work. That's how they started, and that's how they'll finish. And they will finish, as I said to Gemma the other night, to Drew Harris and Leo Varadkar and Charlie Flanagan. If you want to turn Ireland into Czechoslovakia, we're ready. We know what happened there. The same thing will happen here. You may succeed in the beginning. You may frighten people. You may put people in jail. People may die. Some of us may die. But in the end you will lose. And you will be disgraced to the annals of history for all time. That's where you're going with this thing. When you start to tinker with our constitution and take away the right of people to speak and have the conversation that Rowan and I are having now, you will rue the day you try that. So, to again quote those lines, that line from Charlie Flanagan himself, when he said to the people, vote their hard. Do you remember? Step back.
Step back.
Step back, Charlie.
Step back, Leo. Step back, Charlie. John, thank you so much for coming back to me, and don't leave it too long for the next one, yeah? I'll leave that up to you.
Well, I'm gone now for another 6 months.
No, you're looking great, shape. Ladies and gentlemen, and before I sign off as well, again, big props up to John for coming out. Takes a big effort to come out and speak as eloquently as he does, and I know that we've all missed this conversation, so we won't hold John to anything again. John, we won't hold John to anything there again. But I also want to remind you before I sign off, and I want to thank you for those of you that have bared with us all the way through the conversation. December the 13th, Tracy O'Mahony, barrister at law, BL, whatever way you want to describe her, is holding a free speech event outside Kildare Street. I know I've agreed. I will be there. I will be there representing. I will be there. I know the National Party will be there, and I encourage all the other members of all the other invited guests and anybody from Joe Soap to Joe Normie to Mrs. Normie to Mrs. Joe Soap. Everybody get down there. This is your day. This is your fight for free speech. Is what I've always said from the start of this show, from the start of this platform. This is the battle of our time. Hate speech is the affront to free speech. It's all uncovered. You lose the right to speak, we will lose this country. Us.